What's going on, world? Thank you so much for watching another episode of Insightful Principles. In today's episode, what I want to discuss is the recent quarterly report that came out by the Federal Reserve, specifically the bank in New York. They actually broke down some of the recent statistics in quarter one of 2023 for household debt, and they also broke down some of the credit card balances of what we're seeing currently now within the economy and how that debt has increased. And I'm going to break down pretty much some of the highlights of what really stood out within this report, as well as some of the challenges that Americans are going through when it comes to just seeing a lot of the increases with credit card balances and how this is impacting a lot of people with what we're seeing with interest rates and inflation. So I'll talk about that throughout this episode, but as always, please continue to like, subscribe, and share this video. Definitely helps, and don't forget to hit that notification bell below so you can be notified every week when I drop content. Now, I'm going to explain some of these numbers here, but household debt has risen amongst mostly mortgages, auto loans, and also student loan balances. So total household debt right now is at about $17.05 trillion. Now, this is an increase from about 148 billion from the most recent quarter of the end of 2022. And it showed here that for the mortgage balances, that right now is at $12 trillion at the end of March. Auto loans is at about $1.5 trillion. And then lastly, student loans is at about $1.6 trillion. And then we also have the credit card balances sitting at about $986 billion. Now, when it comes to the mortgage balances shown on consumer credit reports, that actually increased by 121 billion during the first quarter of 2023, and it stood at about $12 trillion, like I mentioned, which shows pretty much a modest increase. Now, some of the balances on home equity lines of credit, which is also known as HELOCs, that has increased by $3 billion. And it stated that this is the fourth consecutive quarterly increase following a nearly 13-year declining trend. And it actually highlighted how the outstanding HELOC balance stands at $339 billion. Now, when it comes to a HELOC, that's essentially when you have people that they own a mortgage and they may have a certain amount of equity on that mortgage, and what they do is they're actually borrowing against that equity that is within their property. So they're taking out a line of credit, they're essentially borrowing against themselves. But the challenging aspect of that is this is actually extending your mortgage, because you still are going to have to pay back that HELOC. You're going to have to pay back that home equity line of credit that you're taking out. The best analogy that I could compare this to is you have a 401k. A lot of times, if you're actively working with an employer, you can actually borrow against your 401k and you're paying yourself back. But what it does is that's money that you're going to have to pay back, and that can actually take away from some of the potential growth within your 401k because you're pulling money out of the plan. So that's the best way that I could compare with thinking about what a HELOC is. Essentially, you're borrowing against yourself, so you're taking out debt. But like I said, it can extend the amount of time that it takes you to actually either pay off that mortgage or pay off that loan on your 401k. And sometimes it definitely can be a strategy that you can use, but most of the time you want to try to avoid taking out debt. You want to try to make sure that you're keeping your balance steady and that you're continuing to be able to build that equity. Now, like I mentioned with the credit card balances, they had stated that it was pretty much flat over the recent quarter, the fourth quarter of 2022, and they stated that how auto loan balances actually increased by $10 billion in the first quarter, and it has continued to be more on the upward trend that has been in place since 2011. Now, other balances, which include retail cards or other consumer loans, that increased by $5 billion, and then student loans, of course, that's now at 1.6 trillion, and then they stated that it's up from 9 billion from the previous quarter. Now, I did want to really talk on this issue around credit card debt because typically when we are dealing with Federal Reserve that has raised interest rates like they have done over the last year so quickly, what that does is it causes other debt to increase that has variable interest rates. So when you think about auto loans, any type of personal loans you may have, credit cards, your APRs, if they're a variable rate, those are going to go up when interest rates in the economy is going up. So that's why you're seeing that credit card balances have increased. One aspect of that is because of what we're seeing with our monetary policy, it's increasing rates. And a lot of times when it comes to these APRs, I had looked and it stated that how the average APR has now soared to 20.92%. I know when I was looking at the Apple cards, those are actually, the APRs are as high as 25%. So that just shows you right there how credit card APRs can be affected whenever interest rates in the economy are increasing. Now, U.S. consumers, they now owe $986 billion, which is almost close to $1 trillion. Now, this is a 17% jump from over a year ago. And some of the reasons as well of why consumers are having to rely on credit cards is because people simply don't have enough income to be able to handle their bills. And their wages, the income that they're making from their jobs, is not enough to be able to keep up with the pace of inflation. And even though inflation has been cooling, there's still much categories, whether it's transportation, food, even when you think about housing, these different areas is still increasing over the previous year. So, I definitely think when it comes to the credit cards, more than a third of U.S. adults have more credit card debt than they have emergency savings, which is the highest since 2011. And I think this is a very important thing to pay attention to because I think where we're at in the economy, as demand is starting to slow down, a lot of people are having to rely on this because it's just been simply hard. When you think about how inflation is still pretty much stagnant right now, it's not going down as quickly. And, a lot of families are needing to be able to utilize these cards to be able to move and be able to survive in the next month. But I think, some things to keep in mind is you really just have to make sure that your financial house is in order, and also making sure that when we are dealing with higher interest rates, you do want to make sure that those credit cards that have very high interest rates, you want to work to pay those down because it keeps you on a hamster wheel. And if you're only just making the bare minimum payments, you're only just paying the interest. You're not even cutting into the principal. And I also have read something how a lot of people are not even able to pay off their credit card bills before the end of the month, and they're still maintaining those balances from month to month. So I think that, as a person that is, if you are watching and you are dealing with credit card debt, some of the things that you can do, I know you have different methods such as an avalanche method where you typically start with the credit card that has the highest interest. You pay that off, you work to the next card that has the next highest interest, and kind of just keep going down the line. And then the second method is you have the snowball method where you start with the smallest balance first and you work your way up to the highest balance. So I definitely think, really focus on making sure that you're not paying a lot of high interest in this type of economy, in this environment that we're in right now, and making sure that you are monitoring the amount of debt that you have. And simply, there has to be a bigger priority around saving. If you don't have it, if you know that this is something you can't afford, don't spend the money. Think 3 times before you even take the money out to pay for something, and you have to be able to identify your wants versus needs. Is this something that I want, or is this something that I absolutely need? So I think that those are some things that you can do to help control spending. And I think that, in our economy, we're in an economy where it's such a prevalent theme around just instant gratification. We don't want to wait and save for things. We want it now. And you also have a lot of companies that are now offering buy now, pay later. which is also instant gratification, because rather than saving for that purchase, you don't have to pay anything in today's world. You know, you can just simply buy a brand new pair of shoes and pay $1 today, and then continue to keep making monthly payments on it. But that's how it keeps you enslaved. That's how it keeps you in debt. And I think the better approach is having savings, making sure that you're saving for certain purchases, and not being in a rush to buy things, because honestly, you know, I think sometimes we can complicate it. And I think, you know, it's a blessing to be able to have your necessities taken care of, whether that's food, having a roof over your head, having a car to be able to drive from A to B. I think that's a bigger importance rather than having to buy the newest shoes or having the newest car. So I think that it really has to be an emphasis on really saving and investing, and just really delaying gratification. Now, I did want to show you all some of these charts here that was highlighted by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, with what they stated within this more recent quarterly report of 2023 for this year. And it's actually showing here the total debt, which is actually being break down by age. Now, as you can see here with the total debt, it's really showing here that from 70 plus years, this all the way at the very top is kind of in the gray area, is close to almost $15 trillion. So that kind of just gives you an outlook of the total debt balance by age. And then another chart that really stood out to me was the debt share by product type and age for Q1 of 2023. So it really shows here from 18 to 29-year-olds, they have the most student loan debt, which that isn't a surprise. I can understand why that is prevalent. And then it does look like for the mortgage debt, the highest amounts is kind of around the same range from people that are 30 to 39. Even if you look to 60 to 69, that orange line is pretty much showing somewhere around about 80% is kind of what it's showing as far as the amount of debt that they typically would have. And then as you can see with the credit cards, it looks like the category where people tend to have the most credit card debt is about 70 plus years. And then when you talk about the HELOCs, which is the home equity lines of credit, that's showing 70 plus year olds are typically having more debt when it comes to those areas. Now, another thing that I thought was eye-opening in this report was the serious delinquencies of 90 plus days for credit cards by age. So it looks like the age ranges where they had the highest delinquencies was from the ages of 18 to 29, and then followed by that it was 30 to 39, and then pretty much for a majority of the remaining ages, they're kind of hovering somewhere around the same area. So definitely was some very important aspects within this report. I think where we're at now with our economy, things are becoming very challenging for a lot of Americans out there to be able to maintain their standard of living. When we're thinking about inflation, interest rates, definitely is playing a heavy role with a lot of citizens. But that wraps it up for this video. But I thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. As always, please continue to like, subscribe, and share this video. Don't forget to hit that notification bell below so you can be notified every week when I drop content. And I thank you all so much for watching, and have a blessed day.